Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Nerdy Needs video game mid-season showdown here in Brandon, Florida. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, my name is Joe Carlino. Empty chair. Well, I don't even have any words to say about empty chair anymore. He is here. He is quiet. He is, maybe talking in my ear right now. I mean, I can't even get a word in edgewise out of him. Like, I just hear him in my head right now. He's just like, what a Pokemon right there. But, ladies and gentlemen, if you just tuned in, last round, you saw an amazing mirror match between Don Check and Andrew Navarro, where Don proved once again why he is the Snow and the Articuno Master, moving to 3-0. And now we're getting into round 4, ladies and gentlemen. We have one more round of Swiss after this that leads to our top 8 cut. And we're about to get in, ladies and gentlemen. We have William Kasdal versus Zachary Leikweg coming up, ladies and gentlemen. These are two amazing battlers in the Florida VGC area, ladies and gentlemen, with William and Zachary both being 2-1 right now. A win in this will almost assuredly give them a chance at that top 8 cut. But we're going to start looking at William's team, and he has the Gouging Fire with the Ting Lu, the Gyarados, Rillaboom, Annihilate, and a Pixelate Sylveon. Sylveon, a very wild card on this team. However, the Gouging Fire having that Howl strategy with the booster energy to boost the power of the Gyarados, the Rillaboom, the Ting Lu, and the Annihilate. Meanwhile, Sylveon being that one special attacker on this team, and the Gyarados being a sort of helping set with the Thunder Wave, Helping Hand, Taunt, and Waterfall. Meanwhile, we look at Zachary Leikweg's team. He has the Fluttermane, the Tornadus Incarnate with a Focus Sash to guarantee one hit if it's a super effective hit. The Ogerpon Wellspring, Farigiraf, Golden Go, and Ursaluna Blood Moon. So Zachary is running a team that has 2 modes predominantly. He does have a fast mode, but he does have a Trick Room mode as well on this team, with the Farigiraf and Ursaluna Blood Moon being one of the best combinations in Regulation E and Regulation F that we are currently in. And meanwhile, Zachary's Fluttermane is rocking those choice specs, one of the best held items for Fluttermane, as Fluttermane's base 135 special attack boosted with those choice specs at the cost of being locked in to 1 move for the duration that it is on the battlefield. But of course, ladies and gentlemen, it is going to be very important from both of these trainers, because a win by either one of them in this round 4, and they move one step closer to that a coveted top 8 slot. Meanwhile, the loser might be eliminated. However, we don't know just yet on that part, ladies and gentlemen. It is important to note that these trainers are going to give it their all like they always do. They are 2 of the best in the Florida VGC area. William Kasdal, Zachary Leikweg. One of these trainers is going to 3-1. We're going to get into game number 1 right now, as we see Zachary leads with the Farigiraf and the Ogerpon Wellspring, and William leading with the Rillaboom and the Sylveon. A very interesting combination here. However, the Farigiraf will negate the Grassy Glide getting the priority and the Fake Out with the priority, at least on this turn, because of Farigiraf's Armor Tail here, ladies and gentlemen. So it is important to note that essentially this Rillaboom has to go for something like a Wood Hammer or a high horsepower here, unless he wants to take any damage on that Rillaboom. As Farigiraf goes for a Protect here on the side of Zachary, and Ogerpon ends up going for an Ivy Cudgel into the Sylveon here. That does big damage as William goes for the Wood Hammer into the Ogerpon, and Ogerpon survives. And the Sylveon goes for the Substitute. Wow, Sylveon being able to get that Substitute off and gets the Grassy Terrain and the Leftovers recovery here. That is a big play on the side of William Kasdal. By being able to get that Substitute off, it is able to get Grassy Terrain and the Leftovers recovery here. However, it is important to note that Grassy Glide cannot be used with the Grassy Terrain and the Farigiraf out here, as well as the Fake Out, even though Fake Out only works on the first turn, as William is opting to potentially go for a Protect to get a little bit more recovery on the side of the Ogerpon potentially going for an Ivy Cudgel into that slot. However, with the substitute coming out, it will be able to potentially get off either a Protect or maybe even a Calm Mind, or maybe even go for a Hyper Voice to get a little extra damage. As Sylveon opts to go for the Protect here, protecting itself and making sure that Leftovers and the Grassy Terrain gets an extra turn of recovery here. As Ogerpon goes for the Follow Me. And Rillaboom goes for the Grassy Glide. However, the Armor Tail comes out, and the Rillaboom cannot do any damage, and the Farigiraf ends up going for the Trick Room here. The Trick Room coming out and guaranteeing that Zachary's Farigiraf is now the fastest Pokemon on the field by virtue of those Trick Room dimensions being twisted. That is a big play on the side of Zachary Lyquig right there. Getting that Trick Room up and being able to play around that Rillaboom, going for what looked to be a priority Grassy Glide. However, by the Farigiraf having the Armor Tail ability out there, it prevents the Ogerpon from doing any damage. Meanwhile, the Farigiraf going for the Throat Spray Hyper Voice here. The Throat Spray coming out and boosting the Farigiraf special attack by 1 stage. And meanwhile, Sylveon going for a Hyper Voice of its own, knocking out that Ogerpon, ladies and gentlemen. Now, what's important to note is that the Hyper Voice went through the substitute because it is a sound-based move. And now the Wood Hammer comes out on the side of the Rillaboom, and it does enough to knock out the Farigiraf, ladies and gentlemen. Farigiraf goes down, and now the Grassy Terrain will allow this Rillaboom to go for priority Grassy Glides. And now Rillaboom getting a little bit more recovery here, just under 50% health after that recovery. As Zachary brings in the Ursaluna Blood Moon. Ursaluna Blood Moon makes its appearance, as does the Golden Go. And Golden Go comes out here. This Golden Go is a Metal Coat set with the Nasty Plot, which will allow it to do big damage if it uses something like a Make It Rain. However, this Ursaluna does also have Hyper Voice, much like the Farigiraf does and the Sylveon does, so this Hyper Voice will do major damage on the Sylveon potentially, ladies and gentlemen. It is important to note that Zachary's Ursaluna is carrying the Life Orb, so this will do even more damage, not just counting the fact that it is a Terra Normal with the stab boost on this Hyper Voice. And we see the Terra Orb being activated on the side of Zachary. He is flinging it at the Ursaluna. Ursaluna is covered in crystals, and a big diamond ring shows up on top of its head, indicating that it is going to be a pure normal type, thus removing its weakness to grass types, like this Rillaboom here. As Sylveon opts to go for Protect, get a little bit more recovery by virtue of the Grassy Terrain and the Leftovers, as Ursaluna goes for the Life Orb Terra Normal Hyper Voice. This is going to do big damage into this Rillaboom here. Will it do enough to knock it out? It does! It does enough to knock out this Rillaboom. Rillaboom is finally down on the side of William Casdow. And the Golden Go going for the Nasty Plot. It is powering up that Nasty Plot, ladies and gentlemen. That is really big for Zachary's team. And meanwhile, the Sylveon getting that extra recovery on the side of the Grassy Terrain and Leftovers. But Ursaluna, even though it took Life Orb damage, it is getting those it is getting that recovery back via the Grassy Terrain, much like the Sylveon is. And in comes the Gouging Fire coming out on the side of William Casdow, activating the Photosynthesis via its booster energy and getting a speed boost. But now it remains to be seen what is going to happen on the side of William Casdow, as by virtue of the booster energy speed coming out, this Gouging Fire is now the fastest Pokemon on the field. And meanwhile, Zachary has an Ursaluna and a Golden Go that are the fastest Pokemon in Trick Room outside of that Sylveon. Because Sylveon is a slow Pokemon. It is naturally slower than Golden Go, but Zachary could potentially have a Golden Go that is slower than this Sylveon. And we see the Sylveon actually is slower than the Ursaluna. That is a very important note, ladies and gentlemen. The Sylveon was slower than the Ursaluna. And there goes the Hyper Voice, which knocks out the Sylveon behind its substitute. It just remains, what did Golden go for here? Did Golden go for something like a Make It Rain? No, it goes for the +2 Shadow Ball into the Gouging Fire, and that is enough. Gouging Fire goes down. And now Zachary has his Ursaluna and his Golden Go still alive on this turn, ladies and gentlemen. That is an amazing play, but the grass disappears from the battlefield, ladies and gentlemen. So now this Ursaluna and this Golden Go are now dealing with an Annihilate. We see Annihilate being the last Pokemon on the side of William Kasdow here, facing this Ursaluna and the Golden Go. I do believe this is the last turn of Trick Room, ladies and gentlemen. So in theory, William could potentially go for a Protect here to ensure that he gets that Trick Room stalled out and thereby would have his Annihilate as the fastest Pokemon on the field. However, he would still then have to take the Golden Go's hit after the Annihilate, and that would be a +2 Annihilate here, whether it be a Shadow Ball or a Make It Rain. And we see William activate that Terror Orb here once again, ladies and gentlemen. The Terror Orb is activated into the Annihilate. Annihilate, covered in crystals, gets that Chandelier above its head and goes from a Ghost and Fighting type into a pure Fire type. So now Shadow Ball is a neutral hit. However, Zachary just going for the Hyper Voice here. A single target Hyper Voice doing major damage on the Annihilate. And Annihilate going to recover some health with that Citrus Berry, gaining a little bit of health back up to over 50%. But will Golden Go be faster? It is faster. Will this be enough to knock out the Annihilate? But it's going to be close, but it's enough. It is enough, and Zachary Lykwig wins game number 1, 2-0 over William Kasdow and is one step closer to a 3-1 record here at the Nerdy Needs Mid-Season Showdown. That was an amazing battle just now by Zachary and Liam. Zachary being able to play around the Rillaboom in game number 1 and getting that Trick Room up, which was very important in the end game for Zachary. Being able to have that Trick Room up, noticing that Liam's team was mainly full of fast Pokemon there. But it's important to note, ladies and gentlemen, if you did not catch it, that Zachary's Ursaluna is not slower than Liam's Sylveon in the Trick Room. That was an important piece of information there, ladies and gentlemen. And we have to remember, by Sylveon having Pixelate as its ability, it is able to turn its normal move of Hyper Voice, which is normally not effective on Golden Go at all, into a Fairy-type move, which will be resisted, but it will still do damage. And a little bit of damage can go a long way into potentially helping out with potential damage rolls and knockouts late in games. But it remains to be seen now, ladies and gentlemen, as William is potentially thinking about what he wants to do to force a game number 3 here, ladies and gentlemen. He does have that Gyarados, which could potentially make an appearance here by having the Taunt and the Thunder Wave, because by Gyarados having Taunt, it is not a Prankster Taunt, and therefore it is eligible to work on something like a Farigiraf, because Armor Tail only works against priority status moves, or just priority moves in general. It does not prevent neutral moves on priority. So potentially we could see a Gyarados come out here to potentially work around this Farigiraf, getting a Trick Room up and going to town on Zachary's team by getting those slower Pokemon to move first inside the Trick Room here. But will William be able to force a game number 3, or will Zachary move to 3-1? We see a little change-up on the side of Zachary. He leads the Flutter Mane and the Tornadus here against the Gouging Fire and the Rillaboom on the side of William Kasdow here. So a little bit of a change-up on both sides. Zachary leading 2 completely different Pokemon that we did not see in game number 1. And William decided to lead with 2 Pokemon that he did use in game number 1, just a different version of his lead. Remains to be seen what is going to happen here on the side of Zachary, as we do see Tornadus going for a protect here, potentially trying to scout any fake outs on the Rillaboom, but the Rillaboom ends up going for the Grassy Glide that does over 50%, and a Heat Crash into the Flutter Mane. William, realizing that Flutter Mane is one of the strongest Pokemon on Zachary's side, ends up calling the Protect and knocks out the Flutter Mane, and suddenly Zachary is down one Pokemon early in this battle. But in comes the Ogerpon Wellspring here, ladies and gentlemen, and now we have a decision to make on the side of William's Gouging Fire and the Rillaboom here. Now, this Gouging Fire will still be the fastest Pokemon on the field outside of any potential Tailwind by the Tornadus here, but it does remain to be seen what is going to happen as Zachary activates his Terra Orb here, and he is flinging it at his Tornadus here. Tornadus is opting to get some balloons on its head, indicating that it is becoming a pure flying type, much like it already was prior. As Ogerpon ends up going for the Spiky Shield here to protect itself for one turn, as the Gouging Fire goes for the Howl and boosts the attack power of the Rillaboom and the Gouging Fire. Meanwhile, Tornadus going for the Terra Flying Bleak Wind Storm. And it does big damage on the Rillaboom, even through that Assault Vest, but no speed drop. That is crucial on the side of Zachary. By not having the speed drop, that helps out William immensely in this battle, ladies and gentlemen. However, it is now a +1 on that Rillaboom, so essentially a Grassy Glide will do a lot of damage here through the priority on this Ogerpon if William decides to go for it, as Ogerpon is now still neutral to a Grass-type move, but it is not weak as if it would have been if it terrestrialized into a pure water type. So it remains to be seen what is going to happen here, whether or not William decides to potentially keep his Pokemon around. He goes for the Burning Bulwark into the Gouging Fire here, and Tornadus ends up going for a Rain Dance. It is praying to the rain gods to get some rain here in Florida. Meanwhile, Rillaboom going for the Grassy Glide, does over 50% to Ogerpon, and Ogerpon went for the Ivy Cudgel into the Gouging Fire. However, it's important to note here, ladies and gentlemen, that now that the Rain Dance is up, while Ogerpon could potentially go for something like a Spiky Shield here, this Tornadus is guaranteed to hit those Bleak Wind Storms, because Bleak Wind Storm bypasses accuracy checks to hit in the rain. It is one of the 4 Genie moves that was introduced in Pokemon Legends Arceus that does bypass accuracy checks in the rain, the others being Wild Bolt Storm and Sandseer Storm. Unfortunately, Springtide Storm does not do that with Enamorus here, but William opts to go for the Grassy Glide once again into the Ogerpon and knocks out the Ogerpon here, as the Gouging Fire going for the Breaking Swipe into the Tornadus. A single target does over 50% damage, gets that attack drop, which is big, as the Tornadus going for the Terra Flying Bleak Wind Storm, once again doing big damage on the side of Zachary's Pokemon to William's Pokemon. But Rillaboom ends up going down here, which is a big positive on the side of Zachary Lightwood, being able to force another Pokemon out here, as Zachary brings in the Golden Go here, ladies and gentlemen. Golden Go making an appearance on the field here as Zachary's last Pokemon alongside Tornadus, and William opts to go for the Ting Lu, which lowers the special attack of all the Pokemon on the field by 25%. So now it remains to be seen what is going to happen here on the side of the Tornadus and the Golden Go here, ladies and gentlemen. Golden Go could potentially go for something like a Nasty Plot here. However, Tornadus will probably not want to take any hit from this Gouging Fire here, as Gouging Fire is +1, and we saw that the Breaking Swipe did major damage on the Tornadus here. As you see, Gouging Fire ends up going for the Howl once again, boosting the power of the Ting Lu, as Tornadus going for the Bleak Wind Storm here. This is going to do good damage. Will it be enough? It does knock out the Gouging Fire, so Gouging Fire is down, And now it is the Ting Lu and the Annihilate versus the Tornadus and the Golden Go. Golden Go going for the nasty plot here. A little bit of a risky, aggressive play here on the side of Zachary. He's going for the Stomping Tantrum. Will it be enough to survive? It is not enough. Ting Lu at +1 gets a one-hit knockout on Golden Go. And suddenly it is Annihilate and Ting Lu versus Tornadus. So now it remains to be seen what is going to happen here on this turn, ladies and gentlemen. There is a potential for Tornadus to do something here. However, we do see that William kept his Terra Orb activated in the back to potentially be able to live a hit on this Tornadus here. And also with the Vessel of Ruin, this Terra Flying Bleakwind Storm is not going to do much damage. However, there's the Terra Orb activation on Annihilate, and it terastallizes once again into a Fire type, ladies and gentlemen. The Fire type Chandelier showing up on the side of Annihilate here as Tornadus ends up going for the Terra Flying Bleakwind Storm once again. And it does good damage on the Annihilate and the Ting Lu. No speed drop, but the Annihilate getting that Rage Fist and now 100 base power, and Tornadus goes down. And with that, ladies and gentlemen, William Kasdal has been able to force a game number 3 here between him and Zachary Leikweg here at the Nerdy Needs video game mid-season showdown. And that was honestly a crazy set just now, ladies and gentlemen. William being able to play around the Howl Gouging Fire and getting the Fluttermane to go down in one shot in that battle, ladies and gentlemen. Doubling up the Fluttermane on that turn was massively critical for Liam, being able to take out one of the biggest threats on Zachary's side to be able to go after his Pokemon, as he did have the Annihilate in the back. He did have Ting Lu. They both had Terra types, which are resisted by Fluttermane. However, Fluttermane would still do major damage with a potential Choice Specs Shadow Ball, a Choice Specs Moonblast, a Choice Specs Dazzling Gleam, or a Choice Specs Power Gem. So now it remains to be seen that Zachary and William, one of these trainers is guaranteed to go 3-1 after this battle, ladies and gentlemen. Who is going to be our first 3-1 player here at the Nerdy Needs video game mid-season showdown? Is it going to be William Kasdal with his Gouging Fire, Gyarados, Ting Lu, Rillaboom, Sylveon, and Annihilate? Or will Zachary Leikweg with his Fluttermane, Tornadus, Ogerpon Wellspring, Farigiraf, Golden Go, and Blood Moon Ursaluna force an all-important win and get him to 3-1 and one step closer to top cut here at the Nerdy Needs mid-season showdown? We are about to get into game number 3, ladies and gentlemen. I am hyped. I hope you are as well. Let's get into game number 3, and let's see how good of a battle we're going to get after those first 2 battles have been unbelievable. We see Zachary lead once again with his game 1 lead of the Ogerpon and the Farigiraf. Meanwhile, Rillaboom going for William. So William leads with Rillaboom all 3 games, but once again, he leads with Sylveon. So this is a game 1 rematch mirror here, ladies and gentlemen. Farigiraf and Ogerpon on the side of Zachary Leikweg versus the Rillaboom and the Sylveon on the side of William Kasdal, ladies and gentlemen. So it is important to note here, ladies and gentlemen, that we saw how much damage that Rillaboom was doing with the Ogerpon, with the Grassy Glide and the Woodhammer. However, he cannot use Woodhammer on this turn, as Ogerpon ends up going for the Follow Me on this turn, ladies and gentlemen. And Rillaboom opts to go for a Woodhammer, a big Woodhammer into the Ogerpon here, as Sylveon ends up going for a Substitute. And Farigiraf going for the Trick Room. So now Farigiraf has once again twisted the dimensions, much like he did in game number 1, twisting those dimensions and doing major damage for Zachary's team, being able to set up that Trick Room, which potentially means that there are certain Pokemon in the back that could potentially work around the Trick Room here, as now Farigiraf is going to be the slowest Pokemon on the field and therefore be the fastest Pokemon. But with that Throat Spray, it is going to be able to affect the Sylveon through this substitute, as there comes the Hyper Voice into the Sylveon through the substitute, and there is the Throat Spray activation. As we see Sylveon opts to go for a Calm Mind here, ladies and gentlemen. Behind that substitute, it is guaranteed to get a +1 boost to its special attack and its special defense stat, which is major for William here, ladies and gentlemen, as the Wood Hammer once again comes out and knocks out the Ogre Pawn. And Rillaboom takes a little bit more damage from the Wood Hammer recoil. However, Sylveon getting that all-important leftovers and grassy terrain recovery here, ladies and gentlemen. That is important. And Rillaboom getting more recovery. And in comes the Ursaluna Blood Moon once again for Zachary. Bringing in that Ursaluna once again, ladies and gentlemen. It is a monster of a threat here with that Life Orb and Terra Normal. As we saw in game number 1, it was doing major damage to Williams' team. And we have to remember that Hyper Voice will go through that substitute. So even with the +1 on the Calm Mind, it is not going to like taking a Hyper Voice here from an Ursaluna. And we see Ursaluna activate the Terra Orb, and it has that diamond ring above its head once again, ladies and gentlemen. A good-looking diamond ring. But we see Sylveon opt to go for a Protect here, potentially to take a little bit more recovery here and potentially live another hit. But we see the Hyper Voice come out on the side of the Farigiraf, and it does damage into the Rillaboom here, that +1, and Ursaluna going for the Hyper Voice as well. And knocking out the Rillaboom here is going to be major on the side of Zachary as he goes for the Hyper Voice, and it does enough. The Rillaboom goes down. And now Sylveon getting a little bit more recovery here with the leftovers and the grassy terrain. Once again, it is getting closer and closer to being at full health, ladies and gentlemen. But Ursaluna also getting recovery by virtue of the grassy terrain. And Liam opts to bring in the Ting Lu. So not only is the Farigiraf lowered on its special attack, the Sylveon is lowered on its special attack, and Ursaluna is lowered on its special attack, ladies and gentlemen. That is massive on the side of Saiyan Bushes. Both of his Pokemon are predominantly special attackers here. However, they will hit hard on Williams' team. So now remains to be seen what is going to happen here as Ting Lu goes for the payback. It is the fastest Pokemon, so therefore it does not hurt much as we see the Throat Spray come out on the Farigiraf, getting that Hyper Voice, doing big damage on the Ursaluna, and Ursaluna going for the Terra Normal Hyper Voice. And not doing much on the side of Ting Lu by virtue of that Vessel of Ruin, ladies and gentlemen. That is major on the side of Liam Kasdow being able to work around having the Throat Spray negated by virtue of the Vessel of Ruin. While it's affecting Zachary's Pokemon as well, it is affecting the his partner Sylveon just as much as it is affecting Zachary's Farigiraf and Ursaluna, two dominant special attackers in the format. But it is also important to note, ladies and gentlemen, that the Ursaluna was slower than the Sylveon, which does mean that Sylveon could potentially be slower outside of Trick Room here. Zachary might be looking into that as he protects the Ursaluna here and takes a Stomp and Tantrum into that Protect here, thereby negating any damage. As Farigiraf going for the Psychic into the Sylveon. Will this be enough to knock out the substitute here? It is not enough to knock out the substitute, ladies and gentlemen. That is absolutely major for William Kasdow, being able to avoid losing his substitute here, because that could have played massive into Zachary coming out of potential Trick Room here. We see the leftovers and the grassy terrain still giving recovery on the Sylveon here. And the Ursaluna gets more recovery of its own, but the Twisted Dimensions return to normal. That is massive here, ladies and gentlemen, as the grass disappears from the battlefield. 2 So now it remains to be seen what is going to happen here, because if the Ting Lu switches out, then potentially this Ursaluna could go for something like a Hyper Voice that is massively powerful into William's Pokemon here, as we see the Gouging Fire come out on the side of William Kasdao here. The Booster Energy Speed comes out, and it remains to be seen what is going to happen here with this Sylveon, as the Ursaluna going for the Blood Moon into the Gouging Fire. And the Gouging Fire goes down in one hit. Ladies and gentlemen, that is absolutely massive for Zachary. Being able to take out that Gouging Fire, that is a huge threat. But the Sylveon gets the Hyper Voice and knocks out the Ursaluna and the Farigiraf, and it's still behind the Substitute. That is absolutely major, ladies and gentlemen. By having the Sylveon behind the Substitute, it is still going to do damage, and it's not going to lose its Substitute. That is major for Zachary. Being able to not break that Substitute, that is huge. And that is a big advantage for William Kasdao here, ladies and gentlemen. Having that Substitute still out. Meanwhile, Zachary's last Pokemon is that Golden Go. But Golden Go has to deal with the Ting Lu with the Vessel of Ruin here, ladies and gentlemen. And this Sylveon, it's got the +1, even though the Vessel of Ruin is out here, ladies and gentlemen. This is a very tough task here for this Golden Go. Can it potentially do something like a critical hit on the Ting Lu, and that might be able to do enough to knock it out? It all remains to be seen, ladies and gentlemen. This is going to be a very exciting endgame here. It all comes down to this. We're going to go opting for the nasty plot. It's trying to get a little bit of power on its moves, ladies and gentlemen, as Sylveon going for the single target Hyper Voice, doing good damage even through the resist, and the Ting Lu going for the Stomping Tantrum, and it does enough to knock out Golden Go, and Golden Go goes down. And ladies and gentlemen, William Kasdao, he earns a very hard-fought 2-1 victory over Zachary Leikwig and moves to 3-1 here at the Nerdy Needs Mid-Season Showdown. What a set between Zachary and William, ladies and gentlemen. Liam being able to play around the Gouging Fire and working with the Ting Lu, just being able to have that extra power on his physical attackers, and going in Game 2, being able to predict a Protect on Zachary's Tornadus, taking out that Flutter Mane. That was absolutely massive in Game number 2, because that was one of the biggest threats that Zachary had on his team to deal with Liam's Pokemon here, ladies and gentlemen. But then you look at the rest of it. In Game number 1, we saw Zachary use that Trick Room to absolute perfection, being able to take out Pokemon that were right there, ripe for the taking. But Liam figuring out that Ting Lu with its Vessel of Ruin, being able to lower the special attack by 25% is absolutely critical to William being able to force Game number 3 and end up winning the set. And what's that, Empty? Okay, Empty says, I have no idea what just happened in that battle, except, you know, I'm an empty chair. And yes, you are an empty chair. That is why your name is Empty Chair. But ladies and gentlemen, we have one more round of Swiss coming up, and then we are going to break to our top 8 cut, ladies and gentlemen. Please stick around. We have one final round, and it is going to be essentially a win, and you're in. Please stick around at the Nerdy Needs Mid-Season Showdown.